Absolutely. Well, moving on a little bit more from how the techniques of revision that work, and that's, I think, so important. If you take one thing away from that, I would take away those top tips there. But to look a little bit about our app, what we've built to try and to build the systems of good revision into something that's like there in the palm of your hand. We'll talk a little bit about the program I've developed. We mentioned the Lightner card system. Tassomai is the Lightner card system on sort of steroids, really. And it's a program. This is how Kit and I know each other. Of course, that Kit's school uses the program. That's how we got talking in the first place. What Tassomai is a retrieval practice program. So it takes care of those sort of first three things in that list of spaced, scheduled, and interleaved practice, self-quizzing, with crucially very fast feedback. And now you may not be using Tassomai, and I'm not here to sell this isn't an infomercial. You can do exactly the same thing, or your child can do exactly the same thing, as Kit said, with flashcards. The key thing in any kind of revision like that, self-quizzing, I believe, is rapid feedback. So avoid, when you're self-quizzing, doing something where you fill out, you answer 200 questions and then you don't mark it until the next day, because then you've lost the freshness, and the feedback, and the rapid feedback is really crucial. What Tassomai does is essentially diagnose as we go along where your strengths and weaknesses are, and give you as a learner quizzes that help reinforce knowledge where you need more support, and scaffold, generally sort of setting the level right for you, and sort of increasing in difficulty as you go along. But it's always built with this idea of trying to keep this plate spinning. I essentially designed this out of a need from what I would have needed when I was revising, and what I saw my students needing. And on that point as well, if you're using it through your school, as I'm sure many of you are, what you see on your child's app is only one aspect of it. We're also feeding that data to teachers. It's probably worth, as parents, checking with the teachers, are you using the data? Because we see sometimes teachers don't sort of log in and look at it enough, but we're able to give the teachers a lot of data in terms of where the gaps are. You can probably see on the slide that we had up, the sort of dots grid, all the colored dots allow a teacher essentially to see, right, here's where students are doing well and doing less well. But what I want to come on to really is whether or not you're using Tassomai, how as parents we can help give our children a little bit more structure in their revision and strategize, because I think that's really key to getting the absolute most out of the time available, and making revision as effective as possible. So on the next slide, you'll see a very nice picture of a sort of tree. And this is my kind of, my long-term passion project was to build this tree. What I wanted to do for my students was to build a system that says, okay, as you practice and you go along, let's find out where your strengths and weaknesses are, but give it to you in a sort of explorable graphic. And if your child's using the program, you'll see the tree on their app. Let's see if I can get it on my phone here. And I was actually, this is me doing Macbeth, and you can see I've got sort of some red leaves, some problem questions in here. Now, if I want to find out where my gaps are, of course, in that, I can click on those leaves and find out these are the questions I'm repeatedly struggling with, and use that to sort of steer my notes a little bit. Let's say you're not using the app, you're not using that, or maybe we want to apply this to history or computer science or something that Tassomai doesn't do. Well, my sort of top tip in terms of strategizing and so on is, number one, to sort of build a plan, to look at the time you've got available and get a calendar, get a wall calendar, tear it up and stick it on the wall in month by month, so you can see the time remaining and where are those milestones going on, where are the mocks, when have you got a topic test that your teacher's setting you, when is the real thing, when do you want to build in your kind of practice paper thing, which I would leave towards near the end, but not too late. And then the other sort of main thing I think to do is to get a map of the specifications, required knowledge. This is like really top tip, I think, from me. You can get the specification document, that is like the syllabus, as most people would call it, from the exam board's websites. So if you know your child is doing, well, we're mostly talking science here, if your child's doing AQA Trilogy Science, you can Google that and get the specification document. It comes out as a big PDF, and you can print out the key pages. Please don't print the whole thing, because they do like 100 pages of complete rubbish in there. But the key stuff is about 15 pages in the middle of the document. If you've got that and you print it out, you can go through that with your child. You can get it as a sort of booklet or stick it to the wall again and go through each of those things. They're very clearly written, and they say the student should be able to recall Newton's second law, F equals ma, and apply that in context. It'll say something like that. So you can really, even if you're not a physicist, interrogate your child on that. It's like, well, how do you feel about that? Do you feel confident? Do you know it? Do you know it? Or are you unconfident, or have you never heard of this? And with each thing, give it a little colored dot or a sticker. This is a good place for highlighters. It's just to mark it so you can see on that whole specification, where are the red areas, where are the green areas? And then you can really build your plan about, okay, we're going to focus on these topics week by week, and we'll check in on them and see how they've improved. And it could even be that self-assessment that after a week or two, you check in and go, how are you feeling about that now? Can you explain that to me? That's that self-explanation thing again. So if you've got that specification, you've got a roadmap for the whole thing. Yes, you might use quite a lot of paper. I'm sure you can put it on an iPad too, but that sort of thing starts to get a plan. And the last thing I would say about this kind of planning and strategizing is, if you've got a plan, then parent to child, you now have something to talk about, which isn't, are you working hard enough, which is really hard to quantify and always ends up acrimoniously. If you've got something that's a plan, you can say, okay, now let's talk, what's the sensible amount of time you think you can spend on this each week? And then you can say, have you spent that time? Again, sorry to go back to sporting metaphors, but as in sports psychology, there's a really key principle which is called SMART goals. That is to make any plan you make, any training plan you make, very specific, that's the S. Oh, sorry, this is a mnemonic kit, sorry. Specific, measurable, attainable, I think I've got it wrong, realistic, that's why you shouldn't do mnemonics, and time-bound. You make your plan to say, right, you're going to do this specific thing by this specific time, we're going to space it out, and we're going to cover that. If you've got that plan in place together, and you do that together, you don't drop it on them from a height, of course, then you've got something to talk about, and you can really say, okay, how are you getting on with that? You're falling behind. Okay, well, where is this going wrong? Have we set the bar too high? Am I not giving you enough time? Maybe you don't have to do the washing up today and you can have time to do more of that. And you've then got something to work together on rather than against each other. So thank you, Emma. Realistic. I think that's what I said, but I'm attainable is, crumbs. I've forgotten. It's too long since I've done this. So that's kind of my spiel really on like planning, but I do think my co-founder that set up Tassomai originally with me is called Madeline Inkin. She's written articles in the GCSE Survival Guide, and she's a child psychotherapist. That is, she's not a child, she's a psychotherapist who works with children. And this was really from the beginning of what we wanted to achieve with Tassomai, was about making these things communicable, because if you can talk about how it's going, then you can have this kind of constructive relationship instead of being at each other's throats and having the door slamming. So fewer porcupines and a healthier kind of relationship. So that was my bit on that, really.
Yeah, can I just jump in just a second? I think it's imperative, and I say to students, especially the closer you get to the real things, what they must be doing is knowing their priorities and working on their priorities, because otherwise it's vast. And it's, as I say, 10, 11 subjects often, and it has to be a kind of a hit list, a to-do list, and it's kind of like, again, it's a pack of priorities, and from the top to the bottom, the most important priorities, the bit that I always get the motor effect question wrong in physics is a common one. And then they keep working on, that's right, left, absolutely, and they keep working on it, and then it goes to the bottom of the pile, and the new priorities at the top of the pile, and then it's just keeping working on those priorities. Otherwise, one of the things that happens is one of the things that happens is they always start at the beginning when they start revising. It's not just topics that you need to know the areas, but also maybe the types of questions that they struggle on. So do they struggle on calculation questions, or written questions, or practical questions in sciences, or even assessment objectives? And that your teachers, the students' teachers will be talking to them quite a lot about assessment objectives. And you can actually do that analysis yourself on the mock exams. So if they get that exam paper back, then they can look through a mark scheme and identify exactly what type of question that they're getting wrong as well. And that's very powerful, especially if they're going for those higher grades. So identify weaknesses and target them. So remember, it's individual kids have individual priorities, and they have individual learn objectives that they need to do. And the more they can hit those things, it's just, you do little and often. I'm just doing one of my priorities from our hit list, from our to-do list.
Well, I think this all sort of ties together again as well. That kind of building a plan and kind of measuring how you're going is, I think, as well, really key. If you don't have that kind of witnessing, if you like, of how you're getting on, how you're feeling about these things, it's very easy to just have things as on or off. Oh, I'm rubbish at this, I'm good at this. And you'll always feel like you're rubbish at this thing. If on the other hand, you've got that kind of plan, you're keeping a map of it, and you check in little and often, you can say, okay, I've actually gone from a confidence level 2 to a confidence level 3, and you can start to witness those incremental, those marginal gains, those kind of little incremental improvements. And that's where, confidence comes from. And we really shouldn't underplay confidence as a factor in this. The more you build confidence, the more you're going to accelerate in your kind of revision power and really reap the dividends. As far as priorities, of course, is a perennial thing. As adults, we're all in the same boat as well. I just had a conversation with someone in my team about helping everyone at Tassomai prioritize their tasks, because otherwise you get stuck on the one big problem and forget to keep everything spinning. So it's true in revision as it is true in life, of course.